Thank you. So I don't know who wants to go first. And if you do want screen sharing, Laura would be able to help you with that as well. So, but it is, you know, we're pretty informal. So if things don't flow the way you planned, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Is everybody familiar with Zoom and know where to unmute themselves as needed?
Yeah.
Yes.
In the bottom.
You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you want us to start, Kate, since you called us out first?
Sure. Yeah, go for it, Juel.
So it's been interesting, obviously, as everyone else has been experiencing. So,
sorry, I just thought Al.
So it's just been a lot more technology than before. We were kind of scratching the surface of what different capabilities were on different things. So let's see, for the last kind of Giving Tuesday, we were helping with the Puyallup Food Bank's event, I will call it. So we were looking at social media, and we looked at kind of a lot of integrations with what they had going. So they did several Facebook Lives as part of that Giving Tuesday, and it definitely bumped their numbers. Like for social media, they got a lot more shares off of that. They were getting more like 800, 1,000 people looking at it, as opposed to just like a couple hundred. So the Facebook Lives definitely were like bumping their viewing like quite a bit. We also had to do more work on like their website landing page than we normally would have to, because it just all was online. So being able to have that place on social media, and then when it went back to the website, having that be a comfortable place for people to give. Puyallup Food Bank also explored, they're using Harness now. I don't know if anyone else in the group using Harness right now. No, it's an interesting platform. So it allows you, the donor, to go online. They don't have to make an online account, but you can. And what that allows you to do is you can make that one-time gift, or you can opt to give monthly. The other things that you can opt to do is round up your purchases. So if I'm purchasing something at the grocery store and I've set my Harness to donate all my extra change to the Puyallup Food Bank, it can just be rounding up all of my purchases. And so I'm not, as the donor, I'm not feeling that fairly large hit. But again, as we've all seen with best practices, if we can get them into that habit of kind of continuing to give, they will. So that's been something that's been going well. Like every other online platform right now, we are seeing glitches. I think I've seen glitches with every single thing that I'm using.
Yeah.
So I would normally be, I feel like if this was normal times, I would be somewhat outraged, but it's just kind of, there's just so much more people online. So for example, Harness had a glitch where I was messaging with somebody on Facebook. They're like, hey, I'm on Harness and I'm trying to give and it won't let me. And of course, that's like, you know, your heart starts like getting slightly panicky. And it turned out that they just had a momentary thing where if she didn't create an account, it wasn't letting her give. And then of course, Harness fixed it and it was fine. But I mean, I feel like we're seeing that kind of thing across the board. One of our other clients is the American Public Works Association. So as part of this, they're now creating a lot of webinar content to be able to continue to provide value, training and just value for the membership. And again, like the web is doing pretty well. We get somewhere between 40 to over 100 people on there. It just really depends on what the topic was. Yeah. But so we've been using GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting for that facilitation. But I feel like there's just a strong push towards video. Obviously, we're on this video call, but other ways to connect with video, people are really interested. we did have to listen to a talk recently where they did say, however, watching yourself on video creates like more stress for you as the watcher. So that was something interesting to hear, and just be aware with, with donors when you're looking to connect with them, like what platform you're using. I know some of the platforms will kind of minimize your own head a little bit smaller and make the person that you're talking to bigger. So that is preferential for the other person, so they're not kind of losing their mind.
What we're seeing too is there's a lot of stress from the people presenting at the webinar, because there's not a lot of reflective learning, because people are used to getting the facial expressions back. So the people that have volunteered kindly to put on a presentation about crisis leadership or crisis communications or crisis planning are having a hard time, because they're used to giving us talk where they can see other people and see the reflection. But in a webinar situation, there's sort of no one to reflect on. So as the moderators, we're ending up doing a lot more of like over exaggeration of facial expressions and stuff like that, because we don't want to make any noise to be on the line. But as the person that's coordinating, as their only audience designator, I have to be a little bit more like, yes, that's fantastic. I'm emoting a little bit more, which does take it out of you as the person presenting. So I mean, it's like one of those things where if you have back-to-back meetings, you may want to schedule yourself a little buffer time and a little time to like massage your smile muscles as well.
But I feel like with all of our clients, we're having to really coax them onto video platforms. Like they're not just stepping into that role necessarily. They're like, oh, I don't want to be on video. You're inviting people directly into your home in some cases, and so they're just reluctant to kind of really get out there and be on video without somebody. They're just used to all the videos being completely polished. The message is completely done, and they feel more comfortable with that. And we've had to really encourage people to step outside their comfort zone and start putting those messages out now, and not waiting for some distant time in the future when they'll have the message all perfectly together, that it's okay to be vulnerable on video, and just kind of talking that through with your organization a little bit more. So it's building that time in.
Yeah, and what we're seeing too is that, like, for instance, with the Puyallup Food Bank, which we rolled through their marketing plan really fast for their event, but people like that personal connection, and it's okay to be a little bit human and a little bit flawed, because that actually brings it a little bit more down home, and people, especially on a live platform like Facebook, they appreciated that. So it wasn't even a negative. It was, something like, oh, I'm talking to them personally.
It did well. I mean, they raised $22,000 for that week, so it went well, especially since we got connected with them and we decided to do it, I don't know, the week before or something like that. So I think having it, like I said, it's just a lot of different platforms. I don't know if there's any other questions about a specific platform to connect with a specific group, or are there any like specific challenges people are facing?
Well, and Juel and Bethany, if you could even just say, like, we're Lilt Design, this is what we do, just kind of introduce your organization as well.
We'll skip past that part.
Helpful.
Sure. So we're a consulting organization. We work mostly with nonprofits. We're located in Tacoma. We were founded in 2010. We are a women minority-owned certified firm. So a lot of our work right now is kind of jumping on with different organizations to help them boost specific campaigns. So usually we'd get hired for a capital campaign, or maybe just ongoing marketing efforts. People were realizing that they needed to do outreach in a certain way, and we would come on and supplement staff. Currently, what we're doing, I feel like, is a little different. As you can imagine, it's, people are needing to fundraise really quickly and change platforms dramatically, and they're used to inviting people in for tours. We're working with community healthcare as well, and it was the same thing. Oh my gosh, they're so cute. Hi. So, yeah, community healthcare is kind of facing the same thing. It's like they had their highest rate of conversion is doing the tours. So it's inviting people to the organization and doing a tour at a healthcare facility, which like nobody wants to do right now. So it's like, you know, how do you convert that experience and that connection? And you never fully can, but what are some ongoing ways to do that? And then what are some different ways to kind of do a different appeal versus the events? We're looking at
historically, we've done a lot of events and conferences and that kind of thing. And so we have several clients that are looking at how to transform it from a fully in real life event to a partially virtual or a totally virtual or that kind of thing. So we're exploring a lot of different conference platforms, kind of. I mean, like you're never going to duplicate that experience, as Juel said, but we're sort of trying to help people navigate through those waters as well.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, has anyone else on the call had a virtual event already this year?
Yeah, this is Carrie with KNKX, and we've had one, and we have one coming up early next week, and we've got 2 additional ones in the works.
Cool. What kind of events are you doing? Like, what are you...
Sure, and you will hear from additional guest speakers on my end. I apologize.
Yes,
we
awesome.
have lots of love and activity over here. My job is Director of Major and Planned Giving, so we did a major donor event, and from KNKX, we do Jazz Blues and NPR News. So our first event was a trial run with a solo pianist and an interview with one of our on-air hosts, and then our one that's coming up next week is kind of a state of the station address with our general manager and our director of content. And we used Zoom and are using Zoom for both, as well as fundraise as a registration platform.
I was curious if anyone on here, one of the things I was looking at was the integration between Facebook, like direct giving on Facebook, and then having that go towards a specific organization. I can see that it's possible, and we were eyeing it, and then the crisis hit, and currently if you push any of those buttons, they're saying that they're delayed. So I was curious if anyone's using that platform right now to go like donate on Facebook directly to your organization. No? Okay.
I've heard that it's just not a good idea to use it. I've not used it successfully. I mean, I'm not a nonprofit, but I work with a lot of nonprofits, and I've heard that it's just not a good platform yet, because it's kind of age prohibitive for some people. And a lot of, from what I can tell, a lot of contributions do come from an older demographic, and they're still like, you know, debit card, check, cash. So I think it's good, but the crowd that tends to give in that way is not a huge crowd. So everything that I work around, like you know, I make promotional videos. So most of the videos that I do, and for some of the more recent events that we've promoted through video, the call to action has been to sign up for something, to provide contact information, so that any kind of funds that we get online, or you know, that we can get funds online or over the phone by contacting those people directly. Yeah, it's kind of old school, but it's honestly the best way to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, it looked like to us, I mean, it was free to set up, but I don't know, I might set it up just on something fake and donate like $10 and see how long it takes to migrate over. I think that was my concern, is like understanding how long it took to distribute the money. They're saying they're not taking a cut, and that's why I was curious.
I'm from Hilltop Artists, and we looked into fundraising through Facebook as well, and saw that for nonprofits, if you're registered as a nonprofit, then you're able to have no processing fee. We didn't go with it because we couldn't capture any of the donor information once they donated. A donor has to opt in for email on the when they donate in order to have us get their contact information. And so we just encourage people to donate through our website. Additionally, we've had a lot of people do personal fundraisers, and if someone has a personal fundraiser on their page, we don't get any of their contact information of the people that donated via that person's page. And then additionally, there is a processing fee if you're not a nonprofit. And so we don't encourage people to do their own personal fundraisers on Facebook, but it happens because people love to be able to do them, but it's not our it's not suggested or encouraged by our organization.
Makes sense. So I don't know if we have any huge other gems of wisdom. I'm sure we'll jump in earlier because we're a mouthy group, but I would love to cede the floor to hear from Carlos or someone else that wants to.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You know, for Juel, Bethany, or whoever, as you mentioned that you're working with some organizations that have done conferences in the past, and you're looking to make that more of a virtual event. How does it work with when you have speakers where you might have breakout sessions? Have you had any experience with that?
Right. So the two platforms that we're looking at, it's interesting because the platforms pre-COVID, they're set up as if they're online training courses almost. And so they're thinking that providing content is the #1 top goal. And what we're hearing from people that are possible attendees is that it's not the case. There's a group where the content is the #1 goal and it needs to be good or they're not going. But there's another group that's looking to network, that networking is very high for them, and that includes most of our sponsors. Most of the sponsors are asking for what you're saying, which is the breakout groups and being able to chat with people. So depending on which platform we're going with, we'll probably do the breakout portion. If we have to do it virtually, we'll probably do it on Zoom. And then we were also talking about doing it as in-person geographic small groups, hosted possibly by a sponsor as well, to allow that sponsor to have interaction, provided that that's going to be
Legal.
allowed. Yeah, legal. So we would have to, cap that portion so that to make sure that there wasn't just a glut of people in Bothell, but there's, not people down in wherever. So we're gonna have to probably ticket it, make sure that doesn't get out of control. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's really helpful. And there's a related question, if I might.
Sure.
We have a speaker who's considering, but it's going to be out of the country. He's a great speaker, and I'm not sure about connectivity, and he wasn't as well. What is your experience, if any, been with that?
We schedule routinely a practice session a day or two in advance, preferably at the same time of day that the person will be speaking. Just kept, it doesn't always work. Sometimes you'll find that the practice session is a tanker, like the connectivity is terrible and it goes flawlessly, or vice versa. But yeah, our definite method has been to get in at least a half an hour early and do a test the day of, but also to do a test run the day, like at the same time on a similar day.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we're definitely still experiencing these weird blips in like internet usage where it's just like all of Zoom went down maybe 2 weeks ago several times. Yeah, KNX is like nodding their hand. Yeah, and so it's just like everything went down. So luckily we weren't hosting anything at the time, but I was hearing for different people, and then everyone's assuming that it's their fault that they're not using the tool properly. But everyone's kind of, there's nothing that pops up for people like, this platform is experiencing technical difficulty, please come back. So it's been definitely a downfall, which is why we're, trying to push people to do the pre-check and then get everyone online like a half an hour early just to make sure we have everybody and connectivity's up. I feel like for your out of country guests, you could definitely do both of those on the platform. And then depending on who we're using, like we were, when we were talking to virtual conference, they were asking us, how many sessions are you going to stream at the same time? Because they put dedicated bandwidth depending on what you're doing. So depending on which platform you're using, they may also try to help you. If you said, oh, I've got somebody, you know, that's going to be coming in from out of country and I need to make sure that doesn't go down, they may be able to, you know, assist with making sure that that session is a priority.
Great, thank you.
And then, let's see, Kate, I'm looking at your question on the chat. Juel, are you seeing any other best practices being flipped on their head? When to communicate, for example, when to communicate and or how frequently? Are there any platforms you recommend to increase efficiency as digital communications are amped up? I was gonna say, I think what we're seeing is that people are tired of COVID emails. Nobody cares if you're cleaning your facility. We assume that you're doing that anyway, so stop sending those. Just, how about that?
Yeah, I feel like the best practices that I feel like are a little hard to drop, I think it's the letter from the president. I think the letter from the president used to come out quarterly, or it was in some sort of, you know, newsletter format, and now they're coming out a lot. And I feel like it's kind of hard to tell your president, like, hey, you don't want to, but it's like, if you could at least get it in the e-blast as maybe a shorter format and then having like a click to a longer link. Because what I'm seeing is that there's 2 or 3 paragraphs of information, and then down at like paragraph 3 or 4, that's when you're seeing the thing that's changed, like something in the operation has changed, there's some sort of action that they're hoping for. So it's so far down, you know, they're being so careful, like maybe this is a really hard time for you, you know, possibly, like, so they're kind of going through all the contingencies of the person that might be receiving this email. And so it's like, by the time they get to the action point, you better hope that that person is really committed to reading that email, because otherwise they're like, you know what, I have 5 other emails I need to read and I'm moving on. So I feel like if they'll let you move that action piece like earlier in the letter and then kind of go through the rest of the things, I feel like that would be great. I think the other thing that I've seen is there used to be, I mean, best practices, like we're all super professional all the time. And what I'm seeing is some of that is being rewarded when you are a little bit messy. Like you're letting a little bit of that process like come through and letting people know we're working on a plan, but no, we don't have one right now, or some of those different things. Like people are more forgiving if they're hearing what they think is the truth versus some sort of sanitized version of we're all okay. So people are way more forgiving than I've ever seen in the past. I'm also seeing some interesting kind of out there things, like City of Kent right now, their Twitter feed is very humorous. It's being run by like an Evergreen student, and they bumped up to like 10,000 followers right now. So they are interspersing that with public information that they would like their citizens to know about, but the rest of it is just like they're just talking about the other cities, like, you know, Renton, you better watch out because otherwise we'll come and take IKEA, and just crazy things, and the other cities are starting to jump in on it. So I think that, you know, allowing there to be some humorous whimsy when it's available, because we can't really do that with the e-blast so much, but you have other platforms, you have other opportunities. So allowing there to be some other humorous things feels very uncomfortable. We're, I think, all used to making sure that everything is very unoffensive as possible. So I don't know, it's something to consider, and we're definitely starting to see it more. Let's see. Have you found with the number of virtual events and fundraisers and the space between the events? So would I recommend one virtual fundraiser or a series of smaller virtual fundraisers? I think that's a tough question.
Yeah. I
think it depends on how much you're looking to raise. I do feel like in some ways that having smaller virtual fundraisers online is a little bit easier. it feels like you have achievable goals that you're asking people to meet. You're saying, okay, I only want this, as opposed to like a gala, you would be looking to make a lot more money. So I feel like if you don't make that, it feels like you put all your eggs in one basket, and then people get that feeling like, oh, we didn't make it. So I feel like I would be more apt to do several.
Yeah, I have some, I guess, insight.
Yes, please.
Okay. So the funny thing about the way that events are happening right now is that I think that there's a real strong case for some that are being done really well. And I think that we can all learn a lot from churches. Churches are doing it super well. It's almost like they've been preparing for years. So the cool thing about the way that churches are doing their thing, and what makes churches kind of like what makes a church sort of like the ideal is that they have a simple mission, obviously, when it comes to spreading a message and converting people. But when it comes to the way that they're presenting things right now, it's in a way it's like they're putting on a one of these virtual fundraisers in a way every week. And what they're doing, or the way that churches are doing it, that I think we can all learn from, is that it's not so much an interactive thing. It's really more of a presentation, and they provide like disproportionate value, right? So there's music, there's it is a show that leads through an inspiring message, and then finally gets to a call to action. And it's really hard not to want to get involved or give when you've been given all this value. And it's done in a way, I think that we have to kind of get away from the idea that we all have to be in the same room and all of us have to be interactive, because when you do that, I think that you open up the door to a lot of bottlenecks, and you kind of create the possibility for things to go wrong. So if you just have a really well constructed program where you go, okay, this virtual event is going to be an hour and a half long, and this this is how we're going to entertain people, this is how we're going to make people laugh, this is how we're going to make people cry, and then this is how we're going to ultimately put out our call to action, and more importantly, this is how much we're going to ask of every individual contribution. I think you'll have a lot better results overall. So at the my whole thesis on what is not just what's happening, but also how to work in this environment, is to create an irrefutable argument for a specific amount that people have to keep in mind that people need to donate, and making it as simple as possible for them to give that specific amount, right? So for instance, a really awesome moving presentation that tells people for $20 you can feed 2 kids for 1 weekend, right? And so that immediately lets the audience know, okay, like they're asking $20. And if you say we're asking $20 from you to hopefully get to $10,000, that is just makes it easy for the viewer to make the decision. They don't have to just think very hard. They're just like, they want $20. This is how they're making me. This is how they're making it easy for me to give. And what a great presentation. How what a cool production they put on, because they must really value my contribution. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Carlos, and I think there's a lot of value to what you said there in terms of kind of making it more entertaining. That's something that we've definitely focused on and looked at in kind of our environment here. So to give you guys some background, if anyone's unfamiliar with PNTA, we have been producing events and working with tons of nonprofits kind of all over the Northwest for about the last 45 years. And of course, for us, kind of moving into this nonprofit season in the spring here, we started to see everything drop when the whole COVID situation came up. So we kind of pivoted and started transitioning into preparing to do virtual events. And we've noticed a couple of different trends with that, which is really interesting. As we've kind of been following these trends, one, we've noticed, live events, there's a lot more tolerance for things to be messy per se, There's nothing perfect about what we do in terms of live events. And no matter how much you plan, things will go wrong. And that's just part of the deal, and accept it. But I think looking at virtual events too, there's definitely a need to be much more cinematic with the way that we do it, in terms of kind of making sure that there's a lot more pre-production ahead of time and a lot more planning. Because, people are looking at these events now as not, I'm in a room and if something goes wrong, well, I'm with 10 other people I can sit here and talk with. And there's that whole community element as well. There's this drive to make it really cinematic and polished. And I think that's what people are expecting. And so we're kind of noticing that, one, that is one trend that we need to focus on. Two, I think it was great that you pointed out the need to bring in entertainment, especially if you're doing like an hour-and-a-half stream. One thing that we've been telling a lot of our clients is, you should generally try and keep your online virtual fundraisers to about an hour, unless you have some serious entertainment components in there. Because once we're all in a room, if people are drinking and eating and there's socializing going on and there are things to see and do, there's a lot to keep people engaged and focused. But when you have to connect with someone who's sitting on their couch at home, and now you're asking them to sit there for an hour-and-a-half to 2 hours while you do this virtual event, who's to say that the next auction item doesn't come up and they go, well, I'm not interested in that. And they go into the kitchen to do some dishes, and all of a sudden they come back 15 minutes later and you're 5 items down the line, or they missed half your raise the paddle or whatever that is. So I think there's definitely a need for that. Another big thing we've been focusing on too is trying to make it engaging. I think there's really something to be said for the community element of all of these events. And that's something that we're really lacking right now. And I think that really hurts in a sense, because we all really enjoy these projects we work on. I think we're all passionate about the nonprofits that we work with and work for, and all the fundraisers we do, and we feel great about the funds that we can raise. But there's so much to be said for that community element and being able to share that with other people. So that's something that I know we're actively focusing on kind of in our area and in our soundstage where we're doing these live stream virtual events, is creating that engagement and fostering that community interaction as best we can. And we're constantly looking at different methods to do that and different ways to engage people. Another couple of trends. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just really interested in that. Do you have any examples of how you're fostering that community online?
Yeah. So for one, what we're doing is, at the start of these live streams, we're telling people, here's how you sign on and bid, and make sure to use the live chat feature here. We generally go through YouTube because we notice that's a really low barrier to entry for folks. Certain things, like we can go to Facebook Live simultaneously, and we can do that, but you'll notice that a lot of that kind of elderly faction of the population, who are going to be some of your bigger benefactors, they may not use a platform like Facebook. And Facebook is so full featured in all the different things it does that it's almost too much to ask someone to hop on there if they're unfamiliar with it. But YouTube, we can just give them a link and say, there's a chat over there, and you can send messages in. We can take those messages and we can overlay them right on the live stream, so someone could say, oh, we bought this trip on the live auction last year and it was the best experience for our family. Or we'll notice that people sit there in the comments and kind of, give each other some flack and kind of say, oh, I know you can bid higher than that, and we're working to kind of get our auctioneers who are in the space as well, all of that information visually, so that they can create that interaction and engagement with people as they're bidding live. Another thing we're doing too is, we did a couple events where people were either dressing up, or like we just did Homeward Pet Adoptions Furball this past weekend. And a bunch of people sent in pictures of their dogs sitting in front of the laptop where they were sitting there bidding or watching the event. And we were able to take those and put those up during the stream and kind of show, people are all engaging and watching from home, and how fun is this? So we're doing certain things like that. We're looking at integrating more kind of polls and things like that in those feeds. But really just doing what we can to foster engagement. And we're always kind of pushing to see what more can we do to even further how much we're engaging folks. in terms of the live virtual events too, you know, I think there's a lot of trepidation from a lot of nonprofits to go that route because it's totally new territory and a lot of us have never done this. For years, we've been producing these in-person auctions or fundraisers, but now going virtual is really, really scary for a lot of people because you just don't know what's gonna happen, you know? Not enough people have done them to really give us kind of data and statistics to say, you know, this is a benchmark and these are the expectations we can set. You know, and I'll say historically, we've been kind of collecting our own data and monitoring it. And we're noticing that so far, every single nonprofit that we have worked with to do a virtual event for, we have beat their goal. So not only are we raising the funds that they need and hitting that desired goal, but on average right now, we're beating their goals by 40%. Now, I don't know if that's a trend that's going to continue, but I was looking at another event planner's post on LinkedIn, and they were talking about some of the data they've seen. And donations to nonprofits right now are higher than we even see at Christmas time, which historically is a huge time for fundraising for nonprofits because people are feeling generous and it's the season of giving. But we're seeing that people are really invested in their nonprofits right now. And even if we do go virtual, there's still plenty of ability to raise those funds and meet those goals. And I think that's something, you know, that's really important. And while it might be scary right now, I think we're going to see more and more numbers coming out that really kind of back that up. You know, and in terms of doing these live virtual events, I would say, you know, one of the biggest things to consider up front is ensuring that you're touching base with all of your benefactors or the people who are supporting your organizations, your stakeholders. Because, you know, we can post the event and ask people to join, but unless we drive people to that link and make sure that we have that engagement, it's harder to guarantee that you're going to hit your goal. But if we can really drive that, you know, engagement and get people to come to these streams, we're seeing historically everyone's hitting their goal. We have yet to do a fundraiser that hasn't hit their goal. So I think that's really exciting. And the other exciting component of this is, you know, you might be limited by the room or the venue that you're in terms of how many people can come to this event. You know, you might be able to only put 300, 400 people into a room, but now we can bring 3,000 to 4,000 people into a live stream. So you can really kind of increase the volume of folks that you're touching and the volume of donations you can potentially tackle. Not only that, but I would say also overhead is really diminished. You know, you're not paying for a venue rental space. You're not paying for decor. You're not paying for AV to come in. You're not paying for food and beverage. So I would say overhead is generally lower and people are still hitting or exceeding their goals. And just a couple questions here that I've seen kind of trickle in. So how incorporating live music into events and virtual fundraisers in September and October. So I would say, I think incorporating live music into a virtual event is really cool. Kind of the platform that we've been using here is we have a soundstage up in Seattle, and we have a team who's, you know, done concerts and festivals and all of these different kinds of events, but we have the capacity to bring in a live band. And we've done streams in here where we've brought in jazz quartets or guitarists or whatever it is, and we can bring this entertainment in and absolutely incorporate it live. In terms of, you know, whether or not you were to use a DJ or something like that, then you run into the issues of potentially having copyright issues. So that's a different concern to face. But live music, especially with local groups or people involved with your organization, I think it's a great way to add another level of entertainment, and it's absolutely feasible. Thoughts on virtual fundraisers in September and October? I would say we've seen a lot of hesitancy for people to start taking those events in September and October, and hesitancy to take them virtual. You know, because people are holding out, they're waiting. Everyone wants to have the in-person event, but nobody knows when that's going to be okay. And so now I think we're starting to see all of these events that are looking at September and October are now considering going virtual. And that's great. You know, I think there's still a lot of room to be successful and raise money in the virtual world. But the issue you're going to start to hit is if you want to do these highly produced events where you're expecting to raise hundreds of thousands or even millions, depending on the charity or the group you're working with, you're going to start to see October and September book up really quickly. I know we've had a lot of interest on our end, and we're seeing certain days during those months where 4 different event groups have reached out to us and said, we want to do this event with you on this date. What does this look like? So, you know, I would even say, even consider maybe bumping up some of those events if that's possible for you, and look at maybe July and August too. You know, historically we fundraise in the spring and the fall because that's when we know kids are in school and people are working and people aren't traveling during the summertime. But it's a different time now. People aren't going to be traveling as much during the summer either, because there's still kind of this concern that's here. Mary asked about doing hybrid in-person and virtual events later in the fall. I think that's a phenomenal idea, and I think that's also something where we're going to see this, you know, whether it's a year down the line from now or sooner, that we can start having those large 400-person events again. I think we're always going to see a need for a hybrid event at this point and a virtual component to every event we do. You know, some of the stats we've been tracking as well, we've been seeing some statistics that are saying 37% of people polled said they wouldn't feel comfortable going to a large gathering before 2021. So I think that's concerning for us in this realm, but at the same time, even once we get to a point where people feel a little more comfortable and we can gather those large groups, I think there's always the concern that, you know, some of your benefactors who may be in their 60s, 70s, 80s may not feel comfortable coming to those events. And we don't want to exclude them by any means. So I think, you know, as we kind of get to a point where we can host these live in-person events again, there's always going to be an element or a need for a virtual component to that event so that we can make sure we're reaching everyone who's interested in supporting your organization. I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think it's going to be something that we're going to see historically moving forward. Every event will in some way or another have a hybrid component to it.
Question for Nick or Carlos. We did another event. We're not in charge of AV usually, but and it had a very large monitor, like these large monitors, and you were able to go up and interact with those so that people that were virtual attendees from home could then talk to attendees that were actually at the event. So it felt like they were more part of the same community, so they could, you know, watch the live stream of the program, but like during the what would be the cocktail hour portion, there was like a little bit more, you know, activity. Have you guys seen that, or are you helping host that in any way?
Carlos, you want to go ahead?
You know, to be completely honest with you guys, I have just not seen a lot of very successful live events. Like in terms of, you know, in terms of things where there's troubleshooting and things kind of work out really well for a little bit, but then, you know, there's it's just so distracting. You know, I think that I just think that we as a infrastructure, most people are just not set up for that kind of thing. I don't mean to be pessimistic, but if I was talking to a client, sorry, I'm like in an office. I don't know if you guys can hear all the other stuff around here, but
and Carlos, could you take a moment to introduce yourself and what you do as well?
Yeah, give me one second. Sorry, I just had to be like, hey, shut up. So, yeah, so I am a producer. I'm a commercial video producer. I primarily make television commercials and web promos for nonprofits and also for-profit companies as well. But so my experience is not as much in the live, you know, in the live event field. I think that there's I don't know, Nick's company is more in that direction. But if I were to be talking to a client that is a very small nonprofit and they said, hey, I want to put on an event to raise $50,000 to go towards this food bank in my community, what should I do, like, to get as many viewers and to get people to call? You know, I'm just gonna think about the lowest common denominator and also what's like the best way to ensure that people can give their money and that we can take it. So just some practical steps I would say is, if you want to, if you can team up with a church locally that can let you use their system, if you if you can't rent a studio or spend the money to go and have that live stream set up, team up with a church. A lot of churches will totally work with you if you just go, hey, we want to have this live thing, and we'll obviously we'll give the church a shout out. They can be a sponsor of it. You can use it, and again, churches are pretty sophisticated when it comes to this kind of thing. So and also they're all about giving. So team up with one of them, and then a lot of times if they have their own media people within it, they can take care of a lot of the headaches for you, so that you can just focus on what's important. Focus on the program, the call to action, that kind of thing. If you can't find a church to partner up with, ask someone that might have that connection, or look for another organization locally that has that already set up and try to partner up with them. To me, it's better to just go and make that acquisition instead of like trying to put something up yourself, especially if you're doing live music, because it's just not a good idea to do live music unless you have a setup for to stream live music. Because can you imagine doing live music through a microphone like this? It would be disastrous. So so again, a huge advocate for teaming up with churches in that regard. And then also, I'm a huge advocate for creating a exclusive content, like a long video, like a documentary or something like that, to replace part of the event. I think that people that are viewing from home, they want to be entertained primarily. People have made the decision on whether or not they want to give just by looking at your mission statement or looking at one or two images that are related to what you do and who you serve. So you don't really have to do a lot of convincing, just like when someone's buying something, they've already made that purchasing decision, like within 2 seconds of looking at it. It just comes down to, if you're going to share a story of, who you're benefiting, send someone out to, or you go out to someone, do the whole social distance thing, like, keep 6 feet apart or whatever, but put a camera on them, interview them, get their story, and then just do some very light editing. You don't have to do anything crazy, just have it look good, sound good, edit it together very, very simply, put it on YouTube, and then, have people, route people to that YouTube video so that, so they can see like, hey, this is a real live, a real life story of someone who we've impacted. And you don't have to worry about weird lagging or interruptions. You can have that video for years. It can be shared. It might even go, like viral or hood famous, and so the last thing is, if you guys remember, like in Mexico, because I'm from Mexico, and in Mexico there's this huge fundraiser, national fundraiser called the Telethon, and they would have like really awesome live music, and throughout the event there would be people that would say, hey, we hope that you're enjoying this presentation or this performance. If you want to give to to this charity, you can give this much and call this number, and there's someone that's ready to take your call, ready to take your donation. I think that still totally works. I think that we're so caught up with trying to automate and systematize like giving, where it's like, hey, people will still call a phone number. If you make a good awesome video presentation and you go, call this number, I will literally pick up the phone right now and take your your debit card information. I think people will still do it. I think that if the more that we try to automate stuff, it's just the more that we set ourselves up for failure. I just don't think that technology is there yet, that we can just like do everything from remote remote locations. We still have to work really hard to get our money, I think.
Yeah, Yeah, and I would say, you know, I agree with some of that, Carlos, in the sense that I definitely think having a strong ask video and kind of a call to action is great. I also think there's, you know, a lot of value in providing people several channels to donate within. You know, obviously there are some technical concerns on both ends, but, you know, I think what I really love and value about using some of those fundraising softwares and doing a virtual event is we kind of have the option to gamify it a little bit and get people invested in hitting this goal, and we can track those numbers really in real time. I think, you know, just personally thinking about it, I think the scariest thing to me about saying, you know, call into this number is now you either have to have kind of a network system of phones where there's one number and you have 8 people ready to answer, or all of a sudden if you have one person on their cell phone, you know, if they get a call while they're on the phone with another person collecting donor information, collecting that credit card number, what are the chances you now lose that donation because we couldn't pick up the phone and they just say, you know, I'm not interested at this point. So, and I do agree with you, you know, the softwares are not entirely there yet for virtual events. You know, we've even seen that we've had to kind of take some of these softwares and see where we can pull data from the software and use it in our own systems. And we're working with like Greater Giving right now. We're in a conversation with to kind of say, you know, how can we better set your software up to support these kinds of events? Because virtual events aren't going away, I don't think. And I think the hybrid component will always be there. So, you know, I think you're totally right. No system is perfect and set up for this right now, but I think hopefully we get there.
Yeah, I think like, you know, having that diversity of options is key. And I think that an older demographic is a lot more willing to just give, you know, and so they will still work with phones. You know, sometimes they will still like, you know, they'll fill out a form and like, mail it. And I've seen Donor Perfect be a really good platform because it's super easy. I think it's donorperfect.com. Donor Perfect. And yeah, so yeah, I think it's just a diversity of thing. And my thing is just to like not put all of your, you know, eggs in one basket, like someone else earlier said, and just be like, this online event is going to totally, you know, raise half of our funds for the year. You know, it's like, no, you might not. You might actually like not raise anything. But if you could at least make it super entertaining, then I think that you will have done a good job. And also, one thing that I did want to mention in this, you know, thinking about what kind of knowledge I could drop, if any, is to just like make sure that all of your current online presence is, you know, if that it's good and that you're already communicating a message. Because if your website is out of date, God forbid your website's not you know, set up right so that people can't see it well on their phones. If you don't have good, you know, strong images, it doesn't have to be super quality. You don't have to drop a bunch of money and hire a bunch of people to go and make it look all nice. But as long as people can, you know, just glance over your Facebook, glance over your Instagram, glance over your website and be like, okay, this is what they do, this is who they help, and this is their mission. Again, that's already helped someone make that decision on whether or not they're going to give right away, you know. So just make sure that all that stuff is looking good, and then as long as that's good, you know, you're gonna not only make more of a passive income, but you're also you know, you are raising the likelihood that during some kind of event you're going to get, you know, a little extra cash.
Yeah, no, I think that's all a great point. You know, and one thing that we're kind of recommending to folks that they do as well is if you are going to take these fundraisers virtual, whether you do a live virtual component to it where there's a video that people can stream, or whether you just put it online, you know, we're kind of saying, hey, if you're going to do a virtual auction on this date and go live online somewhere, you should open up all of your fundraising a week ahead of time, as soon as and start promoting it. Open your fundraising early. There's no reason that people can't start donating before the event, and you can use the event as kind of that final push to say, look at where we're at and what we're already doing, and look at we have to get that much farther. And you can use that to kind of stimulate some of those donations and push people to donate further. And then additionally, if you have people who are older and they're not as familiar with it, they have the opportunity to call or email in ahead of time and say, hey, you know, I want to make this donation. I just don't know how to do it through this platform. Or here's how I want to support, you know. So I think that's something we're definitely encouraging as well.
And I feel like
one of the things.
I think she glitched me. I was going to say earlier to Carlos's point. So I feel like the video. Oh, almost. Okay. So I was saying that Carlos was talking about, you know, creating that video asset and then being able to have that for all time. But I would question, or not question, but for a lot of the organizations, what I'm seeing is you created something amazing for whatever your last event was, and that is not online. So wherever that video lives, wherever that testimonial or that heart tugging video is right now, it's like you can dust that back off and push it up for maybe a smaller give. And maybe it needs to be, maybe you need to cut the beginning of it off because it talks about that year or something like that. But a lot of you guys have that amazing video. And I feel like when I'm checking out online presences, like I can't just find that somewhere. So finding that and getting that up to YouTube or wherever you have your videos stored, or it's something that you can bring out for your, you know, for a period of time to help you raise money. It's something that you could have if you're just like, no, I don't want to do that. It's something you can have up on your website permanently as to, like, you know, what your mission is, because it's, you know, we've all seen them and they're usually amazing. And I do love Carlos's a lot, quite a bit. But it's just such a powerful tool. And I feel like you probably have a couple of them already.
So we do have another question in the comments. I do want to note we're kind of closing on our time here. And so I want to take a moment to thank Juel and Bethany and Nick and Carlos for accepting the invitation to be here today, and to all of you for being here. And I'm going to send out an email with a recording to this, and I invite, maybe I'll do like a Google Doc. If anybody had something they wanted to share about, like I wanted to hear more about Thank You from Laura Rose, that we could kind of crowdsource a doc of other platforms and technological resources that you're using that you like. That would be, I think, something that others might enjoy as well. And then, so I think after this question from Monique, I think we can go ahead and wrap up. And I just thought I'd get my thank you in before it's too late. So the question is, you know, what have you found things to avoid for virtual fundraisers, like maybe kind of pitfalls that people are falling into as they're figuring this out?
I feel like,
oh, go ahead.
I feel like not making it concrete, whatever the ask is, like somehow when it's online, there's sometimes a lack of clarity on what it is that you're fundraising for, or at least how far down the board that gets you. And then on the flip side of that is, like, once you do reach your goal, just being able to come back and congratulate people. Having that congratulatory community experience is part of the things that we all really like about fundraising. Like, oh my gosh, we made our goal and we're going to make this happen. And it's fantastic.
The virtual high five is extremely important to close the loop and thank your donors, not necessarily in the formal way that we're all used to, but in the virtual, like, look what we've done. Like, that helps build the community of givers.
So if that's like something that, you know, you send that email, but maybe even just a few months later, being able to do like a short video of, like, you know, here's a quick interview with somebody who was helped out by the fact that you gave a few months ago, or just because I feel like you're going to need to have more touch points. You just don't have the opportunity to bring people over to your organization and really show them what they've helped build. So kind of building that into the pipeline of the events seems like it's really important right now.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, not only do you need to kind of convey your message and kind of close the loop with those folks who are donating to kind of ensure that there is retention of your donors over the years and they really do feel valued, But I think, you know, there's also something to be said for knowing your audience and knowing what they expect. You know, so if you're going to do a fundraiser where you anticipate you're going to raise $300,000 to $400,000, maybe doing it over a Zoom call isn't the best, because they might want a little more production value there. You know, but at the same time, if you're looking to raise maybe $10,000 for a community project, maybe that is a good platform for you. Or maybe you can do a fundraising video like Carlos mentioned. I think it comes down to knowing your audience, you know, definitely. But I would also say, you know, making sure that what you're putting out is professional and branded and speaks to your message is important. I think there's also something to be said for knowing whether or not you need an auctioneer and MC. And this plays back into kind of what I'm saying about knowing your audience and what they expect. So one example I saw recently is an auctioneer that I work with annually does a fundraiser down in Florida, where it's a wine auction, and they raise on average $800,000 a year at that auction. Well, they decided that they were going to take it online and do a Zoom fundraiser, and they didn't want the auctioneer to be there, and they weren't going to pay him to come join anymore and foster that. And they wound up raising about $75,000 and wound up losing money on the event. So I think, you know, knowing what your goals are in the end and knowing how to properly reach your audience and convey your message in a like professional and polished way is definitely very, very important. I would also say, especially with virtual events too, if you're going to have a live video component, knowing where to limit your live items is important. You know, people don't want to sit there and spend 2 hours watching someone on stage rattle off 40 live items. You know, I would say, you know, if you could keep it to under 10 and kind of stick to that hour mark. Or we did one recently where we had like 15 to 20 items, but we said, you know, we're going to auction them off in groups. So group 1 is items 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to close it at this point. So things like that, that kind of just, you know, keep it concise and keep it to what's important, I would say is there. Lastly, in terms of kind of doing a virtual event, making sure that it's entertaining. You know, anyone can jump on and say, you know, we're going to do this event and get up there and speak for their organization. But you have to keep in mind too, that when it's more cinematic and it's more broadcast like this, you want someone who's going to be a very entertaining and lively personality out there that's going to help drive donations and foster engagement and keep people intrigued with what you're doing in your stream. So those are just a few things that are just high level thoughts in my mind.
Yeah, that's huge. I think that you Nick pointed out some real important things there. And if you do, I put on the comments here something that Absolute Ministries is doing. I think they're doing it for later this month, I believe. It could be June, but they're going to do just that. They're going to put on like a 45-minute video that they're producing with a bunch of testimonies and stuff for the people that they serve, and they're going to publish it. They're going to upload it to YouTube, and then they're going to publish it on the day that people, you know, go log on to their website, and they're doing it in a way that is, you know, super like cost effective, very practical. And then they're going to have some live components as well. But the main presentation is not a quote unquote live event. It's something that has been pre-produced and, you know, uploaded and just published at a specific time for all those people that log on. YouTube also has a feature where you can kind of opt in to watch it with a party. So just keep that in mind. And then I think that these kind of you know, Zoom calls, those can still play a part in these events, but I think that they're really good for like Q&A type stuff. You can have your you know, your main event be this, you know, highly produced thing that, you know, tugs at people's heartstrings, and then have you know, an optional Zoom event where people can go in and you know, get to the nitty-gritty questions of like, you know, who's this benefiting, you know, why should I give to this? Like, you can have, you know, more of those questions be answered in a way that, you know, again, you're not going to bore people to death. And the people that really want to be there, you know, they'll be there, you know. So that's basically what I had. And then my main thing has been to just, what I tell all my clients lately is, you know exactly what you're asking. Just know if you're going to ask for money, know how much you're asking for, and try to figure out like what's the minimum that someone needs to give in order for you to meet that goal, so that if, whether it's $20, $50, $100, per individual donation, like that's the figure that we're going to be telling people, like, put that in their head. If you're going to give this much, please, if you're going to give this much, give it this way. And we've just seen a lot more success in that, in that way, than just be like, give. Because then I'm like, oh, well, okay. So yeah, that's basically what I had. And I learned a lot from this, honestly. Like, I'm really glad that I was here to just get all this awesome wisdom from you guys.
Yeah, no, thank you guys so much for having me. I actually have to step out here. We're working on preparing for a broadcast in the studio here, but thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated it. I think there was a lot of great insight and ideas passed around. And, if I can ever be of support to anyone, whether you just want me to be a sounding board to bounce ideas off of, or whether we want to talk about your event and how we can support in that, aspect, please don't hesitate to reach out. I think everyone here got the invite to the Zoom call, so my email's in there. I'm also a member of AFP in the South Sound chapter. So you can pull me up in the directory there as well if you're looking for contact info. But thank you all. This was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed chatting with everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, we also really enjoyed seeing everybody. And Nick and Carlos, thanks so much.
Of course. Enjoy your weekends.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.